Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petralis, and we're so excited. Assistant Coaches Month, week 4, and another tremendous coach on here. Coach has had longevity as an assistant coach, and I think that that's really important. I know myself as a coach, I was, a coordinator, an assistant coach for about 13, 14 years before getting a head coaching job. So, I learned a lot in that time period, and I know as you coach as an assistant, you gain a lot more knowledge as a head coach. I'm excited about this coach we're having on today. Played with Medford personally, very good hockey player growing up, a year younger than me, but was always on the, similar teams that I was on, just a really good hockey player. Played at Medford High School, played collegiately a little bit at UMass and Salem State. So we're really excited to kind of get his expertise on here today, and someone who I think is a head coaching candidate in the near future. So without further ado, from Medford High School boys hockey, Mark Bates. You there, Mark?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, perfect. Awesome. So yeah, man, we're going to get rocking and rolling, but really happy to have you on. I appreciate you coming on here and doing this today. I really do. So thank you.
No, I appreciate you having me on.
All right. So again, what I think is really cool about your story is that you've been there for a long time, and it really reminded me and myself as a coordinator myself, being an assistant coach for so long. Talk about it, because you've been coaching there 13 years and you've coached under 2 different head coaches. So you kind of seen the program go in maybe different directions in some aspects. So talk about being an assistant coach there that long and just kind of what you've learned over the last 13 years.
It's been quite an experience. Obviously, worked with one head coach for my first 4 years. He's actually one of the games my start with Steve DeBenedictis, was the first one to hire me as an assistant coach. And at the time when it was basically a struggling program when we took over. We walked in, we had 25 total kids for our entire program for varsity and JV. So during that year, my first year or two, we had to use kids in the middle school system, mostly 8th graders. Thankfully, we had a good number of them that were playing hockey then to help get the program in. And it was also to try to help get them into the school eventually without going to one of the parochial schools or elsewhere. And thankfully, a lot of them came in and joined the program. And we pretty much tried to build it from there. It wasn't easy because, as you know, trying to bring a new coach in, you're trying to establish your own culture. And
it's tough to change it from whatever the guard was before, of transitioning. And, like you said, a new voice, new leadership, new direction. Yeah, it can be really hard to do that. I totally agree.
Yeah. So basically the way, thankfully Steve was around, because I was, kind of a little crazy back then when I first started, because and Mr. Maloney ever gave me the head coaching job, he probably would have the phone ringing off his hook, because I had a lot of guys that I had talked to previously, and they said, you go in there, you keep the kids that can help you build what you want, and you get rid of the kids that are not going to do that for you. And unfortunately, we try to give everyone a chance. We didn't want to, we heard the kid was a bad kid from the previous year, we try to let the kid, earn our trust, so to speak. And at times a little tough. Maybe some kids, they got a little bit longer release than they probably should have. But again, at the time, we had nowhere else to look. We start getting rid of kids on the team, we're going to be bringing kids up. They're not ready to play at the varsity level. And then they suspecting the kid to injury, which you don't want to do. So you got to keep the kids around that can handle playing at the varsity level, handle playing against 18-year-olds on a nightly basis.
Yeah. And I think that's the hard thing, right? I mean, I think anytime you come into a program, obviously you're going to kind of run into all sorts of walls, right? You're going to run into walls of resistance, or, kids, like you said, not wanting to necessarily buy into that new voice. So, trying to build a program around that, as they say, the magic number is 3 to 4 years before you really maybe start noticing the results of your program, those freshman classes, or in this case for you guys, those middle school classes that were, you're playing younger kids. And like you said, they could be more susceptible to injury, just playing with bigger, older, and more physical kids. And what I kind of loved about you coaching in Medford for so long is that you also play there. You played through the rec program and obviously played through the high school level. So being somewhere for so long, obviously there's a passion and love for the city. So, I've had a few coaches on here and I ask them this question when I know they coach where they played. Talk about your passion for Medford hockey. I mean, what it means to you, and obviously the opportunity of here you are now, still involved in the program, now being one of the voice of reasons of how to coach the program and lead them into the correct direction.
Well, when I was in high school, there was basically is what we all, even my teammates, we all lived for hockey. It made it a lot easier to go to school in the morning, even though, schoolwork wasn't my favorite thing to do, but I knew you had to pass in order to be able to play. And so that was kind of a motivating factor to pull you out of bed every day, get to school. And it was like, I'll never forget my freshman year. We walked in the jamboree and, coach said, all right, let's go. And I'm only a little freshman in there, and we had kids that jumping through the roof all fired up. It was like and that's basically something that we carried on for the next 4 years. And it's something, even as a coach now, you try to get the kids to get fired up and, start jumping around before the game so they're ready to play. Because sometimes some of these kids, because I think they play so much hockey now, it's just like another game at times, and it can be like on Morgan, the locker room. It's like, we got to be ready to play here, guys.
That's a really good point. I mean, that's a tremendous point because, when you play for your high school, those games are supposed to be the only games you really play. And now hockey is just so seasonal. It's played every season possible. Like you said, it could be their 50th, 60th game of the year that they're playing in. And like you said, after a while, it might be harder to kind of get them up to play because at that point they're playing summer. They're probably playing in the fall. So by the time they get to high school, yeah, they've already kind of had a couple seasons under their belt in a sense.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've kind of noticed while I've been coaching. Granted, I've had a lot of kids, they care, but just sometimes it's just that low. It's like, well, it's just another hockey game, and it shouldn't be that way. There should be you got your city name on your jersey, your school name, and you're playing for obviously yourself, your friends, your teammate, your classmate, basically the entire city. So there should have a lot more meaning behind that, a lot more, pride and respect that goes along with it.
Yeah, and I feel like just covering the high school sports that we've been covering this year, I went to the Burlington boys basketball game. They were in the Final Four at Worcester State. They played Norwood, went to overtime. They ended up losing, but they took down 3 fan buses. And you had all sorts of people that took an hour plus truck to get there and were going crazy. And some people I was talking to, they were just people who lived in Burlington who wanted to support the basketball team. So it's just something a lot of kids choose to go to Catholic school. I mean, I did, my family, that's what their choice was for me. But, staying where you play and playing where you're from is something that, yeah, it's hard to explain in words, but there's just such a pride to it of going out there and representing your city or town because, look at your cousin, and this kind of will lead into what I want to talk to you about. In my opinion, Medford, Massachusetts hockey, they've had some great players come through, but the head coach of the Medford High program right now is your cousin, Sean Bates. And to me, Sean put Medford hockey on the map. I mean, I know before them, there were certain guys from Medford, like Kachuk or whoever else, but Sean played at Medford High. He was a product of the system all the way through, played in high school. And I know as a young kid, I mean, we're pretty close in age, but I went to the Garden, I was amped up that they played, CM, who was just absolute monster. I mean, those guys won championship after championship after championship for well over a decade, and he brought Medford to the promised land, played at BU and obviously the NHL. I mean, for you and kind of tying that in with your pride of Medford and talking about it, what's it like to coach under somebody who is, for all intents and purposes, maybe the biggest icon when it comes to hockey in this city by a landslide?
It's pretty fun. I mean, he obviously has a wealth of hockey knowledge. It's all he's done his whole life. Luckily for him, because he was so good at it, he never had to work in what we all consider a real job. So, and I just, with the kids, I don't think they realize how good he was when he played. Because a lot of these kids now, a lot of them when they were born, I think, they were still maybe 3 to 5 years old, so they didn't really get to see him play. Their parents probably saw him play, but they didn't get to see him in high school like we did. And when he played at BU, and then obviously with the Bruins, then even with the Islanders. So he's obviously very talented player. He's a very knowledgeable coach. It's what he knows best. And I think some of these things he runs by some of these kids, it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. It's just it's hard for him to comprehend, where for him, he sees things happening, a mile ahead of times.
Yeah, and that's nice to coach with somebody like that. I mean, obviously playing the professional game, you've seen the game at its highest speed. So, understanding things like power play or penalty kill or breaking out of your zone or, getting the puck down low. I mean, those are all things that, he's seen and done at such a crazy level. Yeah, those Islander games, man. I remember like him scoring like I think it was like a penalty shot or something like that, I don't know I forget if it won the game, but I remember watching on TV and being like, oh my God. And he got into like a fight that game and he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And that was like kind of to me, that was just like, gee, like that's something. So yeah, I found that interesting. I mean, growing up, obviously the name Bates and Medford, you hear that name, that's the first thing that comes to mind. So it's a great hockey family. There's a lot of you. You're all really good hockey players, hockey knowledge. So yeah, I definitely wanted to throw that out there, give you guys your kudos for sure. I haven't played hockey in 20 years. Like, honestly, I covered a game last night, a Fallen Hero game, a charity game, and I was on the ice a little bit skating around. And besides covering hockey games in the winter, I haven't done too much skating in a long time. So I'm an average fan when I watch the game. I love watching the Bees. I'm obviously into hockey. But as far as like little things that I notice, say watching football versus watching hockey, I don't pick up on those little things at all because I guess I don't understand it. So for me, like, how do you kind of, work on things like breaking out of the zone or PK or penalty kill? I mean, what kind of goes into your thought of thinking when you guys are putting that stuff together as far as a year goes and developing who's on the PK, who's on the power play? I mean, how do you guys work that type of stuff?
We try to look at who, our most like versatile guys, because obviously, as you know, not every guy plays power play, plays penalty kill. Even if things go down to 4-on-4 for that matter, it's only some guys that do it because they can handle it better than other guys right now. Maybe next year, some of those guys that couldn't do it this year, maybe they can do it next. They'll get better, have a better understanding at it. It's just kind of you go over to practice, just simple. It's not, you're not really overcoaching anything. You just throw the puck and you have 2D go back together. You tell the D turn and hit the winger, or they can make their D to D pass, and it's pretty much just.
Would you say it's more like, say, your power play? Is that, I mean, really your first line? I mean, is that kind of how you guys look at it, or maybe you mix and match a defenseman for a forward or something like that?
Yeah, it's pretty much our first and second lines that will go out there on the power play, and sometimes we don't have a D-man that can really quarterback the power play that's comfortable back there with the puck, because some kids at this level, they get a little nervous. So they're gonna, especially if you're the quarterback back there, you got to be able to handle the puck. If you fumble it, the other team's going to be going back the other way on a breakaway on you. So sometimes, if we have a forward that handles the puck the best on the team, we're going to put him back there on defense at the time. Some defensemen might not like it, but obviously, at the high school level, you're trying to play to win the game.
I mean, you see it at the NHL level. So it's not like all of a sudden this weird thing that they're doing at the high school level. You see it at all levels. And I found interesting covering hockey this year, how well teams move the puck on the power play. I mean, even covering you guys had a couple power plays. The puck movement was great. I think one of your goals might've been either at the end of a penalty or during or right after it expired. But, there was some good puck movement, breaking into the zone, controlling the puck. I mean, pretty impressed. I felt like at high school hockey from when I remember it, playing when I was younger or watching it. I just feel like high school kids, there is that control at the point. There is a little bit more finesse to it. They do understand spreading out in space and so on. As far as like practice goes, like I know in football, for example, like going into weeks, like I know certain days, like, okay, we're going to be working on, a third down package or a 2-minute drill or red zone, a coverage defensively, and mixing obviously special teams and situational stuff. Let's say you play a team and you have practice the next day, but in that game you go like 0 for 4 on the power play. Is that next day, is there an emphasis on power play, or do you guys just kind of like understand that that's a weakness, you're still going to work on it, but you have other things that you're trying to build on? I mean, do you kind of gear your practices towards your performances from the previous game?
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, we try to focus more so on the 5-on-5 aspect of it. We try to encourage the kids. We stay out of the box. Obviously, it's our best chance of winning the game. Even because, like that goal you brought up earlier, it wasn't something that had to be worked on. It's just someone needed to be willing to stand in front of the goalie on the other team. And oftentimes, for whatever reason, we have guys that they don't want to do it all the time. That particular play, we had a forward back on D that, he's a skilled, he has a lot of skill for a sophomore. He's just, hopefully he can grow because, the kid loves hockey. We had him back there. He made a nice shot, but the kid we finally had a screen. We moved the puck around and finally had someone standing in front of the goalie. It's just simple concepts we're trying to run, get to these kids, instill in their heads. We don't have to overcoach. We're not trying to ask them to do something they're not capable of. Just very basic things that you should be learning when even when you're down at the Mike Squirt level, working your way on up through the system.
Is that a hard sell? Like, is that a hard sell to get a kid to screen a goalie in this time period? Like, say over the last 5 years, is it harder to get kids to do that?
Yeah, I mean, there's some kids that are willingly stand out front for you, but I just don't understand why the kids just don't want to do it. I used to love standing out front. You sit there and take a pounding from the defenseman trying to get you out of there. It's fun, and that's what hockey is battles. And,
yeah, and I mean, and every coach I talk to, right? Like every coach I literally talk to, no matter what sport it is, it's really kind of finding a role. And some kids accept roles that might be small in minutes or but important in task. And, any guy, like you said, it can get out there in front of a goalie and screen a goalie and maybe take that physical contact, that cross checking from behind, but you're giving that goalie a tough time and they have to move around and maybe be out of place a little bit, maybe opens up a backdoor play or opens up a little bit more than that when you shoot from the point and they just don't see it. So, I get it. And I ask you that because I see it in a lot of different sports. I mean, I know in football, special teams, sometimes it's a really hard sell from you guys who are playing both ways, and you make it such a point of an emphasis of this is important. Like this could win you a game. This could change the momentum of a game. This could put us back into a game or put a game out of reach. Like special teams changes everything. So I always wondered that in hockey with PK and even power play, how selling kids doing that is, getting them to convince to get in front of a slap shot or stand in front of a defenseman on a PK when they're about to take a slap shot and block it. I guess it's a hard sell, but it's also, finding your role and buying into it.
Yeah, there's some guys that are willing, but just unfortunately lately just not enough. Obviously the penalty kill, your main objectives, you have to be willing to block shots out there. All the other teams, they're going to have a field day on you. And the thing that drove me nuts, and what we try to show them too is, they watch us get shots blocked all the time. It's like, we can do the same thing. You just got to get yourself on the shooting lane. You have to be willing. And the weird part about it too is if, you kind of shy out of the way, or if you lift a leg up, hoping the puck doesn't hit you, that's usually when you get hurt, is when you're scared of getting hurt. You'll get the puck in the wrong spot. Somehow the puck, when you do that, the puck just, it finds you, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's hard. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember I've had shin pads literally break or crack taking a slap shot off of it. I mean, that's just kind of the role you buy into. Like you said, you accepted. I kind of accepted that from the PK aspect. Like you have good stick movement, good with your hands, and sometimes just being able to get a stick just to hit the stick in time or get just in front of the puck. Yeah, I mean, those are roles you take a lot of pride in. So I always wonder that because I noticed as I coached on certain roles that I felt were so important, even from a defensive side of the ball, of bringing in an extra down lineman or taking a linebacker off and bringing in another corner or bringing in another safety. I mean, those are the roles. And sometimes, kids would eat that up because that might be their only 10 to 12 plays of the game, but they're important parts there, third down situations or whatever. So I always find it interesting because I've noticed such a shift in that, if that's across the board, and it definitely seems like it is. So do you consider yourself like a more defensive minded coach or an offensive minded coach, or do you feel you're pretty balanced? I mean, how do you kind of look at yourself as a coach?
I mainly just worked with the forwards, but if I had to go back and help work with the D, I could do it just because, I've been around for so long. Even when I coached a select program, I want to say about 10 years ago, I did it with a couple of friends of mine. One of my buddies did the forwards and I did the defense. It's not, if you understand the game, it's easy to do.
Yeah, and I kind of noticed that too. I mean, I was always a defensive back wide receiver guy, but as I became a coordinator, I really kind of learned more linebacker and still coach the receivers, because to me, it was about the physicality being a receiver more than it was just running out and catching the ball. And sometimes a lot of those guys were my defensive back, so it just made sense to kind of reiterate the physicality and the toughness and so on and so forth. playoff system. I'm just curious on your thoughts. I mean, there's never a right system. I've been hearing mixed reviews from football to soccer to basketball to hockey. I mean, I guess I'll just ask you, what's your thought about, I'll ask you this in two parts. One, what's your thought of the new playoff system? Again, anything that you think. And then two, talk about maybe how it affected, maybe as of this year, how you booked your non-league games, because obviously it's all about points. So you don't necessarily want to, some teams used to throw cupcakes on there and get, in the football world, get 8 wins because they're not playing necessarily top-notch talent, but they're getting into the playoffs and they're getting that opportunity versus teams that might play a tougher league. I mean, do you guys look at your non-league differently now and say, I wonder how we're going to book these games?
Well, the first part of it, I really do wish hockey would have kept the Super 8 in play. I think with the way the hockey landscape is right now, these kids have so many options, and they might in other sports too, but I mainly just focus on hockey. I mean, I'm sure baseball might have the same issue, lacrosse and so on, but I wish they had the Super 8 because I think it helps brings a lot of kids back to these schools. I mean, yeah, I know the Catholic Conference, a lot of those teams, they're regulars in the tournament. Everyone thinks it's an automatic win for the Catholic Conference teams, but this year some of the publics did very well. Winchester had a big win against a BC High. BC High kind of had a down year, but where they played a tough schedule, they still found their way into the semifinal with this new format. But a couple of publics got to them this year. That league had a tough time with some of the teams from the Middlesex. Even Gloucester had a pretty good year. They beat BC High this year. In a crazy way, though, it kind of seems like the way the tournament was set up, the top seeds still found their way into the later rounds of the tournament. But I just think the Super 8's more fun. Like I always used to look forward to the Saturday morning, whether they had the selection show going on, or I followed Jim Clark's Twitter page. He was always live in the room and stuff like that. It's something I missed this year. And then the other thing I didn't like was some of the venues that they're playing in. Like I understand, other sports teams get home games. With, I mean, some of these places that they're getting packed, and they can't handle these big crowds that are going in there, which it stinks for even some of the family. When you get in the state tournament, that's when obviously you get more fan support. It's not just mom and dad come anymore. Maybe your aunts and uncles, your cousins, grandparents. They're everyone's showing up to watch you, where it's a one and done situation.
Yeah. I mean, even the game that I covered, the semifinal game, was 3 fan buses. I mean, they probably fit 50 kids a pop. So you're talking 150 kids just coming in for the game, like you said, and that's not including friends and family and other school members, the other team. I mean, yeah, I agree with that. And then how, as far as your non-league schedule goes, did you guys look at that at all differently, or did you kind of keep what you had from maybe, pre-COVID, or what you had over the last year and a half?
We kind of kept it the same. It was a little bit weird this year because coming off some of the teams that we played back in 2019, 2020, we didn't play again this year because last year during COVID, a lot of leagues went to they did a league playoff for their individual leagues. And so unfortunately with that, now teams, they need less non-league games. And on our end, where the GBL, it's so small, like Revere dropped their program, and I want to say September. So now we had to pick up two games. We got lucky. Medford was supposed to play them twice, and we ended up playing Bedford 2 times. But our non-league schedule has been pretty similar over the years. So, but maybe moving forward now, we got to try to throw like a couple, maybe try to find a couple more Middlesex teams to get in there, because we saw this year with the new tournament format, Melrose had 1 win, and they got in the tournament, I think, just because of the success of the other teams in their league.
Yeah, I mean, you had Stoneham, who went to like the D4 Final Four, and they played Wakefield. So I mean, those are 2 teams right there that were, one of them's going the finals, and yeah, Middlesex is always competitive. So getting those points, and you're right, they probably got a ton of points because it's pretty good hockey in general. Yeah, it's all, like the more I keep reading about it, I mean, to me, it just seems like travel's kind of crazy. I mean, I had Jimmy Rabbit on here from Kip Academy. He's a Medford guy, and he, they went 7-1 and drew like a 11 seed or something, and he's going to play in Mansfield, and then the next week he's down at Hull. Like he was kind of all over the place for a team that was 7-1 and pretty good. So to me, it seems like some coaches with the points and how things are placed. I think in hoop, there was something that changed, that a team got forfeited. And as a result, it affected a bunch of teams' points and they had to reseed everything. So, it definitely seems like there are some flaws that maybe need to be fixed or at least looked at and viewed. So it's just interesting to see how teams are going to do this down the line, especially looking at their non-league and, seeing the types of teams they are not only playing, but who those teams are playing, because like you said, points do matter and they can most certainly add up in your way. Just curious, as an assistant coach, because it's a lot different than being the head coach, and I know my demeanor on the field was a lot different one versus the other. How would your players describe you as a coach? If I asked them what Coach Bates' style was, what would they say to me?
Well, I try to be very direct with these kids, because what I learned in college, it was hard to get a straight answer from my coaches at times. Why aren't I playing? They kind of give you the run around. It's like, just tell me I'm not good enough. I would feel much better and have a lot more respect for you walking out of this rink right now. But so I try to be very honest with these kids. They might say I'm a little too honest. I do wear my heart on my sleeve when I coach. I mean, I don't hold back, because it's something I'm very passionate about, and it's something I enjoy doing. This, even though it's a little part-time job, it's something I enjoy. It's a little break up from the day and stuff like that.
Yeah, and do you feel like kids? I mean, that type of style. I mean, do you feel has stayed consistently through the program as far as like kids coming through? I know for me, like sometimes it was hard. Like I always felt like I had to kind of adapt, and maybe that was just me. But do you feel like at times now you might have to step off the gas pedal a little bit with that honesty? Are you guys like, no, this is kind of who we are. This is our program. Either get on the bus or get off the bus, as they would say.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously try to adapt a little bit, because obviously you can't push the same buttons with every kid. So but you got to try to, just be upfront with them as a whole, because if inconsistencies come up, that's when you get yourself in trouble. And obviously you want to try to run into headaches all the time coaching. If something happens, you want to try to keep those to a minimum as best you can.
Yeah, and as coaches, like you're dealing with all sorts of stuff. I mean, just like things that are going on with these kids in school, out of school, personal life. There's a lot that that happens, that as coaches over the last few years, especially with COVID and everything else now, are just dealing with a lot more. There's a lot more baggage that can come with the job as far as that goes, and how people feel about certain things. I'm sure masks wasn't an easy thing to figure out either, amongst how different people felt about different things. So as a coach, there's definitely a lot more than just the product on the ice or the product on the field or a court. It's really, it's really a balancing act of wearing a lot of different hats. So, and even as an assistant, more so, because you are the eyes and ears of your program in a lot of senses. You're letting the head coach what's going on. Kids are a little bit more, maybe feel a little bit more comfortable or free to talk more in front of the assistant coaches. Therefore, you can get a little bit of the pulse of the team and understand, so on and so forth. With all of that and wearing all those hats, I mean, when hockey's over, how much time are you taking from hockey before you're even thinking about hockey again, or even before you're thinking about the next season? Or are you kind of always going like nonstop about it?
No, we pretty much back off for that once the season's over for a few weeks, because at that time, whenever your season ends, unfortunately this year, ended early for us, but you want if the kid's playing a fall sport, you want them getting ready for baseball, getting ready for lacrosse or whatever, even if it's, outdoor track, get used to running again and stuff like that. We don't, it's all part of the high school process. You want to try to encourage them to play a different sport every season. Some of them, they just want to play hockey, that's fine. That's their choice. The kid wants to play football in the fall. I'm going to stay out of his way. I'm not going to, because I wouldn't want the football coach bothering me during hockey. So I try to show each season, you try to give each coach their, the respect that they deserve. And you want the kid focusing on that sport, because you want to see them do well and not just hockey, in baseball, whatever they're doing. Even if they're involved with something like a club from the school, you want to see them succeed in whatever they choose to do.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important because even more so, like that's one of the hardest things I know as like a football coach. It's like I get a lot of kids who are always like, I want to focus on hockey, or oh, I want to focus on basketball, oh, I want to focus on baseball, and it can be really frustrating. And it's nice to hear that like you encourage kids, like, hey, listen, you're a part of a city, a town, and this is you guys are representing them. And if you play multiple sports, we want to give you that opportunity to do that. And like you said, not breathe down. I've had plenty of coaches on here that have talked about this topic, and maybe there are coaches in their school that are not encouraging kids to follow and play another sport because they're afraid of injury, or they're afraid of something more that maybe affects them for the following sport. But I also agree with playing other sports because of the idea of you grow mentally as an athlete. I mean, when you get put into leadership positions in maybe another sport, come back around that next season, there's different like weapons in their arsenal, maybe mentally, if nothing else, that was different than the last season they were with you. Maybe they're more confident with the puck, or they're more confident in shooting, or being more physical on the ice. Like that can all translate. I know playing football and hockey for me, the physicality transferred into both games for me. So, that was something that I had consistent. And I would say that, truthfully, football kind of got that out of me for hockey. So, I totally understand what you're saying there. And I think it's great that you guys encourage that. Um, you've been an assistant coach for 13 years. I mean, have you ever thought about taking that next leap or step and to becoming a head coach? Is Medford a place that you kind of always just want to coach, and whether that's being an assistant coach or a head coach, or do you have those aspirations?
Well, I can't really see myself, at least at the high school level, coaching, elsewhere. Just, because obviously everyone from Medford that plays hockey, I want them to come to Medford High and play for me, play for my cousin. If you ever wanted to step down, I'd be more than willing to, take on the head coaching job. I think I'm ready for it. Obviously, I thought I was ready for it when I was 25 years old, but thankfully, I had another guy that had been around for a long time to, help show me the ropes, because I would have been a maniac out there. I kind of learned to like calm down over the years, even with the officials. There was times I would just go nonstop, but I realized that just relax and just kind of have a conversation, because obviously from coaching football, you see some of the same guys over and over again. You get to know them. They're not bad guys. They're just out there trying to make extra money, and
but it can be frustrating. It can be frustrating. I get it.
A couple of, I want to say a couple. I think we had one game this year where I was ready to explode on them, but overall, there was one guy. I think he did like 6 of our games last year, and the short season we had. We had him another 5-6 times this year. So like you get to know the guy, and you make a call he doesn't like, or you don't like, it's easy to just call the guy over and have a little conversation. I try to just have like a conversation with him, as opposed to screaming across the rink anymore.
Yeah, and it's so hard, I mean, as a young assistant too, like you are when at that age, like I know I was, you just fired up, like you're bought into it. There's a passion. I mean, I played at Arlington Catholic, so for me, there was that passion of it too as a player. You want the kids to feel that, you want them to feed off your energy a little bit. So yeah, you can get all sorts of fired up, officiating. And I'll tell you, I mean, I've seen football officials get it. I've seen hockey refs get it, but no one gets it like basketball refs. A game, I'll tell you, the game I covered the other night, that those refs could not have made a right call no matter what. There was no one in that building that was going to 100% agree with the call that they made. And everybody let them know about it. And I've seen that consistency in basketball, and maybe because I'm closer up and getting footage and, right by the sideline or right by the bench, but it's funny. I mean, sometimes you're like, yeah, that was kind of a tough call, but sometimes you're like, oh man, they got to be able to take it because they get it all night long,
Yeah, well, especially a game like that we went to, the gym's probably packed. They can't hide inside the glass of boards like you can in a hockey rink, or even, one side of stadium, the football field. I mean, hopefully you're on the other side of the field, and you're not hearing as much nonsense out of the stands as you would as that 4 guys on that side of the game.
Yeah. It's funny, man. I've noticed it more so this year, and it's an element of the game that I definitely didn't realize existed, but it is funny. It is funny. like you said, you've been in, Medford for a long time, and obviously you've been under two different coaches, head coaches. You've seen programs maybe ran differently, talent pool being different or the same depending on the year, whatever year it was. What would be your advice to young coaches? A 25-year-old Mark Bates who's jumping in and wanting to be a coach or maybe become a head coach. I mean, what advice would you give them as far as getting their feet wet in the game early on?
Um, Probably just gotta get to know your players. Try to be as patient as you can. You can't, jump off the deep edge like I wanted to when I first started. Um, you, you got to have thick skin, and hopefully you're at a hopefully when you start out you're in a school system where you have an athletic director that's going to have you back when if parents start calling, making phone calls on you, or kids aren't happy. You got to just tell them, you just got to set the rules, right up front. This is what you're looking for. You can't, even if you're young, you got to make sure the kids don't walk all over you, because they can tell you're young, you're inexperienced. You got to be able to stand your ground out there.
Yeah. And to me right away, especially where I didn't play in college, coming back and really hadn't been away from the game for 4 years, maybe besides watching college football and playing Madden. Right. I mean, that was kind of my only thing of football. So going back, a big priority to me was, like to gain that respect, was really watching film and really absorbing and learning how to do that from a play to play perspective, how to watch different positions. And I noticed like especially after my second year, that coaching defensive backs and keep moving up every year, the kids, when they know that they see that you know what you're talking about, or things kind of unveil or happen as you kind of tell them it's going to in certain situations, that's when they really gain that respect for you. They really look at you and say, all right, this coach knows what they're talking about. They're invested in the program, but most importantly, they're invested in us, and that's kind of what I've seen the success. And I love asking this question because truthfully, I never get the same answer, and I think for any coach who listens, and I have a lot of coaches who listen, and I get that feedback about this question a lot, truthfully, because, it's the same thing. You don't hear the same answer. So it just shows you there's no right or wrong way of going into coaching and how you can attack it, to give you the most success. So no, that's great. All right, man. So listen, we're going to jump into our last segment here. It's called our Cheney's 2-minute drill. What we'll do is fire a bunch of rapid fire questions at you, 1 or 2 word answers. I do get a red flag if I want to toss a red flag and have you explain something a little further, definitely, and vice versa. If you want to explain something after you say it, you got the floor for any of the questions. So it's pretty fun, and the coaches really love it. So let me get this timer set, and here we go. All right. Toughest away game you guys played this year?
I'd have to say our last game versus Burlington.
Okay. Yeah, I'll tell you, Burlington fan section was rocking at that. I covered the basketball game. If there's hockey fans are like anything like the basketball were, holy moly. Team as a player in Medford that you always just wanted to beat no matter what?
Have to say Arlington.
Okay. I like a good hockey.
Old PBL rival, which I wish it was, wish we still had it that way.
Yeah. That's a great program. That was great matchups back in the day. What was your breakaway move? What is your breakaway move? You go on a breakaway. What are you doing?
Probably looking to go backhand under the crossbar.
Okay. And a triple D glove side or whatever, song that kind of still gets you juiced up a little bit before a big game.
Probably the old school stuff. Still songs from AC/DC, the Rocky anthem.
There we go.
How about what kids listen to these days?
It's so different. Like you
motivated. It drives me nuts.
We're actually looking into like literally creating a high school playlist with all different music genres. So it's like any coach or player, like it's mixed in with music dating back to the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, 10s, like now, like, and I just think it saves so many headaches for coaches and programs, because music is, at least in football, whenever kids are like, can we put our playlist on? I'd be like, what songs are on it? Are there any swears on it? And like, I'm supposed to be worrying about a game, and I'm like petrified during pregame listening to the music on it that there's not going to be like an F-bomb dropped or anything like that. So it's music's always interesting. I love asking this question too. All right. Best podcast or most interesting podcast that you listen to right now besides us?
I'd have to say, I listen to Spittin' Chicklets on a regular basis.
Okay. Best teammate you've ever had?
Oh, you're gonna get me killed. I'm lucky to have a lot of that. That's one of the awesome best things about hockey. You usually have a lot of awesome teammates that you played with. I'd probably say my old high school line mate, Dave Liberatore.
I know Dave. I played on a few teams with Dave Liberatore before. That's very interesting. That's a good answer.
High school.
He's a good dude. I haven't seen him in a long time. I actually covered a game last night with a couple kids that we were actually on the same team, Pat Carney and Jimmy Mason. So it's funny. I haven't heard those names and seen those guys in a long time. Yeah. So that's what I mean, dude. It's a small world. That's funny. All right. Last question. Most talented. I'm not saying your best player, but your most talented player or one of your most talented players you've seen come through the program over the last 13 years. And I know there's a lot of them.
I've had some going. I think one of the kids that had the most success through his 4 years I would probably have to say Jack Lonegan. I think he was I want to say a 2018 graduate around that time frame. It was 4 or 5 years ago, because all those kids should be seniors in college right now if they're on the right schedule.
Was he forward, defenseman?
He was forward.
Okay.
Played a regular shift for us from his freshman year through senior year.
Oh, so he started as like literally a true freshman, or played for you guys as like a true freshman?
Yeah, we had him basically. He was on the first or second line every year, because his freshman year he walked in. We were very young that year, and then obviously those kids grew and they had pretty good junior and senior years for themselves.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Honestly, over the last 5 years in sports, especially in high school, I mean, even my years at AC, I started 3 freshmen within like my first 2 years because they were good, or they had the value of being like, all right, these guys are probably going to make mistakes and at times just be out physical, but these guys are getting experience of becoming leaders. They're seeing the pace of the game, how fast it is. Like, yeah. So, I hear that more and more in every sport, man. Freshmen, sophomores are sometimes the cornerstones of like a team, or like in hockey, in a sense, it could be one of your best players and you don't even know it till you see them come on the ice for the very first time.
Yeah, like you just said, you see a younger kid, you try to take them along because you're hoping down the road that they're gonna keep on progressing, and they could hopefully be your go-to guys come their junior and senior year, especially.
Yeah, and it's a gamble. Some people get mad, especially kids who've been in the program for maybe a few years and felt like, hey, I worked hard this off season, and I played sports, or I was in the weight room, or I played hockey, and whatever team, and and then all of a sudden this young kid comes in and maybe swoops a spot. But those are the tough decisions we make as coaches, and we look at a program for not just a year-to-year thing. We look over a program over a few different years and see what we have for classes and talent, and understand that maybe in 2 years down the road, these young guys we have playing are very good, and they're going to be even better. And, sometimes you ride with those guys a little bit, and it comes with criticism. But, as a coach, I think sometimes people just think you're thinking year to year, and you can't be when you're running a program. You're thinking nonstop. You're thinking always about the next kids that are coming in, or who might be leaving the school to go to prep school, or, who's graduating and what's coming up next. And I know in your guys' case, I think as of now, you only have like one goalie in your program, right? So that's not easy either. The kid, obviously it's great for him, but like there's not necessarily competition or a push there either, which is, it can be tough for coaches at times too, to get that out of them,
Yeah, that might have been the toughest part of the season, especially you only have one goalie, because it kind of disrupts practice as well. You like to have 2 goalies out there, so you can get some flow going. Even just a simple 2-on-1 drill or a 1-on-1 that you're doing out there. The defensemen always, they end up just trying to play defense and goalie, and then the forward's not really. You want them to try to make a hockey play in the defenseman. You want the defenseman to not worry about that there's no goalie back there. But that was a tough adjustment for everybody this year.
Yeah. Oh, it's just the injury. Like if he gets hurt, what do you do? Like, what do you do? So it's like
we had to cancel the game after the first period this year, and it was an interesting year this year. I think every bad thing that could happen did happen this year. It was between COVID, poor goalie getting hurt that game. It was very bizarre.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine. I couldn't imagine. At least in like football, you always at least have a backup quarterback, just in case. But yeah, I mean, in hockey, you don't have a goalie. That's everything. But that was extended 2-minute drill. That was a great conversation at the end. But you've survived our Cheney's 2-minute drill. And I just want to say, Mark, thanks for coming on here. I mean, I've heard nothing but great things. Obviously, we've known each other over the years, but your coaching style, how your players respond to you, what your peers, what your coaches that you work with, especially Sean, think of you. It was great to be able to choose you to come on the show. And I want to thank you for really taking the time to chat with us.
No, I want to say I appreciate you having me on. It seems like you're doing a pretty good job with this podcast and stuff like that. You did a great job when you came down and did that film on the team. I think it got a great response from other kids, and I'm sure their parents were happy with it as well.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Thanks. Yeah, Medford's a hard rink to shoot in because everybody's along the glass, and I feel like that's kind of where we get like a lot of our best shots, and which is a great thing. I think that's cool that everybody's along the glass, but for like what we're doing in like work, we were like, oh my God, this is gonna be really hard, So we definitely had to deal with some curveballs there. But no, it was great. Your kids were great. Like everybody was psyched about it. Talking to your captains, getting stuff in the locker room, action on the ice. Yeah, it was great. And you guys treat us very well with open arms. So we appreciated that too. So Anthony Petrellis from Beyond Podcast, Mark Bates from Medford High Hockey. Till next time.